Story 1. I found a sick young pigeon when I was in Iraq, and I nursed it back to health. It became my buddy and would ride on my shoulder. I taught it to fly by gently tossing it like a football. It would fly in a huge circle and land back on my shoulder. I had to carry a handkerchief on my shoulder because it pooped a lot. I named him Bam after Bam Margera because he went bam against the back of a Humvee during his first flight attempt. Many officers and sergeants were upset about my having this bird, even though I kept him outside in a shaded area and he wasn't hurting anyone. One day, I found him dead where someone had stomped on him. His insides were exposed, and he was completely crushed. Some cowardly individual murdered Bam out of spite and didn't have the courage to confess. He's buried in the desert just outside of Balad, Iraq. I had to be stoic about it because I didn't want them to see how much it hurt me, but my heart is still broken. It was never going to end well because I eventually had to leave and wouldn't have been able to take him home. But it didn't have to end like that. Thank you, everyone, for all your kind words and the stories you're sharing. I hadn't thought about this in such a long time. It was a difficult period in my life. This was in Iraq in 2003, right after the initial invasion, and I was basically still a kid, not even old enough to drink. I lost 2 friends in a helicopter crash, and I lost another friend to a mortar round and my best friend to suicide. This traumatic part of my life got buried in there. I never cried because I was so numb and refused to show emotion to others. But now, after talking about it with strangers and hearing all your stories, I'm in my car teared up for the first time more than 20 years later. Feels good to express that. Thank you all again for being so empathetic. Much love to you all. Story 2. My stepfather's death. My father left when I was 5. He kept promising to come back, so I spent years waiting, checking the mailbox 3 times a day, knowing full well that the mail is only delivered in the morning, but I was desperate. Then my mother met this man. I disliked him for obvious reasons, but he was genuinely nice. They had another child together a few months later. A year later, on a trip to IKEA while we were sitting in a car, something clicked inside my head. I was looking at him laughing with my mom and still remember having a long thought process. My father was never going to come back, as he went entirely radio silent after my mother got pregnant. But this man was here. I had a new family. Everything was going to be okay. I asked him right then if I could call him Dad. He died the next day in a freak work accident. I was 9 and have not been okay since. I don't talk about it, mostly because my sibling was the one who received all the attention. Story 3. Being bullied as a child and always being the friend that no one liked left a lasting impact. I have never fully overcome it and have struggled with low self-esteem my entire life because of those experiences. I often feel unattractive and believe I am not enjoyable to be around. Story 4. When I was very young, my parents got a Doberman named Greta for a family pet. She quickly became my dog, and we were inseparable. My parents didn't like it when I snuck her into my room to sleep, so often I would sleep on the floor with her by the front door. One day shortly after my 7th birthday, I came home from school and Greta was gone. My parents had given her away. I still remember running to my room and staring out the window, hoping it wasn't real. I was told I didn't speak for days after that. That was 42 years ago. My parents have passed away, and they never told me why they gave my dog away. So I will never know. I didn't even get to say goodbye. Story 5. I was abused from ages 5 to 13 by my father, and my mother protected him. He only stopped when I started my period because it could have caused problems. No adult mandated to report such abuse believed me. They accused me of lying. My mother continues to protect him. He was a registered sex offender when she married him. I have significant scarring on my cervix as a result and cannot have children. Story 6. I have never fully healed from growing up feeling different, judged, and left out. It is something I still carry, though no one really knows. Story 7. My sister attempted to harm herself by taking an entire bottle of acetaminophen that she purchased when I let her wander off in the store by herself. I have overwhelming guilt. Story 8. My family moved frequently. I attended 8 different schools. Eventually, I gave up trying to make friends because it wasn't worth it. Story 9. My mom passed away in front of me. It wasn't silent. She whimpered, cried, and was in pain. It was incredibly difficult for her, and it's something I dream about, waking up in tears. I'm grateful I was with her and that she wasn't alone, but I'm left with lasting scars. Story 10. I deprived myself of food while being bullied at work. I became pregnant with a child who lived for only a few moments after birth. Later, I discovered that a nutrient deficiency may have caused what happened to her. Story 11. Finding my neighbor dead by accident was a tragic experience. It was a home wellness check that revealed he had been deceased for a week, and nobody noticed until my roommate and I did. This incident occurred almost 10 years ago, and I have never fully healed from it. Story 12. I was about to put something down here, but after reading others, I guess my life has been pretty good. I fully expected to see many relationship stories. However, I really feel bad for some of you. Story 13. The first guy I ever loved passed away. He was my first love and we broke up years ago. He got married and then divorced. We reconnected and instantly knew that the love never left. However, I was living in another state at the time, and he was still dealing with ex-wife issues. He had a massive heart attack in the shower one morning. He was gone at only 33 years old. My heart broke into a million pieces. It's been a few years, and I still have not fully healed. I never told my parents or anyone that we had reconnected before he passed. Story 14. Depression. Not the kind that announces itself. Mine is quiet, settled like a heavy fog that never lifts. I try to mask it both consciously and unconsciously, suppressing the obvious traits. Most days you would never notice. Ilaf, irrespectivum, function. But there's a shadow to everything I do. Faint, but always present. It stays tucked into the corners of my mind like clutter I keep telling myself I'll deal with later. When the spiral hits, like it has been lately, it becomes harder to manage. It leaks through in the form of irritability, impatience, and this strange compulsion to stay busy. Maybe that's not all that different from how I normally am. Honestly, as I form and navigate new relationships, it's getting harder to tell what's me and what's the depression. The thing is, I usually enjoy stillness. There's something sacred about sitting with nothing but your thoughts. But when I'm in this state, stillness becomes unbearable. The silence turns hostile. It's exhausting to constantly fight thoughts you don't want to exist. I don't blame people for not noticing, or for not wanting to. Depression is heavy, and no one wants to imagine someone they love quietly carrying something so dark. And I don't show the signs people are taught to look for. I don't self-harm. I don't act out or do anything reckless to raise alarms. So, on the surface, there's nothing to worry about. Still, I like to believe the people around me are doing the best they can. Grappling with something they don't fully understand, wishing they could help but not knowing how. The truth is, they can't help. I wouldn't let them. I've built myself into someone who doesn't ask for anything. Someone who moves her own mountains because the people who should have helped me a long time ago didn't. Or grace be given couldn't. And now, the people who do want to help are faced with impossible standards I had to create in order to survive. I am hyper-independent to a fault. If something needs lifting, I lift it. If I'm hurt, I patch myself up. If I need a hospital, I drive myself there. That's how I cope. The way I carry myself, strong, composed, and unbothered, is the only thing that's ever truly protected me. I often tell others I'm just feeling anxious or under the weather. I think at my core I'm meant to be happy, a ray of sunshine, but there's an impenetrable bubble around that part of me. Still, I try to play the part in my day-to-day life, for appearances, yes, but also to prove to myself that even if I can't heal, I can still make the most of life while it's here. And I'll be here for the long haul. Whether that's absurdism or just acceptance, I'm not sure. All I know is we only get one life, and it's over faster than it feels. I'll ride it out. Story 15. Almost dying, being stuck on dialysis forever, and having to tell everyone I'm okay when all I hear is how thankful I should be to have lived. Story 16. Trust issues have been a significant challenge for me since childhood after my father left our family. Although it has improved, I still find it very difficult to trust people, regardless of whether they are my friends. Story 17. My dad had a long-term affair and treated my mom poorly. They divorced when I was 18, and he married his affair partner. I'm 45 now, and both my mom and dad died this year. We found letters in our mom's belongings that provided more details and intensified the pain from years ago. I probably need to return to therapy, especially since I'm now going through my own divorce. 2025 has been the worst year. Story 18. Not to be woe is me, and for sure plenty of other people have gone through worse, but I went through a lot of traumatic experiences when I was younger that I never dealt with. Now, as I'm getting into my mid-20s, I realize these experiences have affected me significantly. I am relatively sure I have depression, but I have bigger fish to fry. Story 19. I grew up without a father, who passed away 20 days before I was born. I am the youngest of four. It's strange. This is not something that directly happened to me, and even though many years have passed and I am now an adult, it still affects me. Seeing people with their fathers and watching other parents together doing everyday activities still stings. I often find myself observing fathers with their daughters, trying to imagine what that relationship feels like and what my life would have been like with that support to rely on. I don't think we realize how much we take for granted until we no longer have it. Story 20. When my dad confronted me as a teen because I painted my toenails, it hurt. I understand he came from a very anti-gay generation, but it still affects me today. I'm not even gay, I'm just a closet goth. Story 21. I experienced a lot in my life and I would simply acknowledge it and move on. By my mid-40s, those experiences caught up to me. I am now trying to reflect on my past to process things so that I can be healthier. Story 22. My husband knows everything about me, but I know I will never fully heal from this. When I was young, I was curious and pushed boundaries, and I killed a lizard in a cruel way. It weighs heavily on my soul. I was only 8, and it immediately changed how I perceived the world, and I never did it again. Honestly, it made me even more empathetic. Every time I think about whether or not I am a good person, I always think of that lizard. Story 23. Mine is not as tragic as others, but being ghosted by someone I considered a best friend, with absolutely no hints or warning, was devastating. Story 24. I'm sorry to hear that you're feeling this way. It's important to talk to someone who can help you, such as a mental health professional or a trusted person in your life. Story 25. The way my first love ended has lingered for years. I have moved on, yet a small part of me still feels pain when I think about how easily they let me go. Story 26. If you ask anyone over 40, they all know that you never fully heal from anything. That ankle sprain in your 20s is still a problem. That case of carpal tunnel syndrome that went away? No, it didn't. Back injuries are for life. Story 27. When my sister and I were in preschool, around age 4, I was kidnapped by my biological mother. She was forced by law enforcement and my father to return me 4 days later. This was not her attempt to keep me for herself or spoil me. Her plan was to harm me for being born and ruining her perfect marriage to my father and sister. I was constantly reminded by her that I was a mistake and how much she hated me. When I was brought home, I was in a state of shock and remained silent and emotionless for almost a year. My stepmother said I was in a coma but awake. Story 28. My dad drove us while drunk when I was a kid. I remember it clearly as I was about 14 or 15 years old. It was late at night, coming home from Christmas dinner at a family member's house. He was swerving all over the freeway, and we almost crashed multiple times. Neither my mom nor he ever addressed it afterward. Now that I have a child of my own, it is something I don't think I can ever forgive. Story 29. I accidentally ran over a squirrel 30 years ago. It is the only animal I have killed. I can still remember the way it looked in my rearview mirror as if I am looking at it right now. Story 30. Mine is pretty harmless compared to what I have read so far. I fell for an online friend. Even though he is a drug-addicted ex-convict living in San Francisco, I have never used any drugs, never went to prison, and I live in Germany. I fell for him because he took so much time to talk to me. Once we texted for 17 hours in a row. It was fun talking to him. He is bipolar, so there were times when he did not talk to me for days, which dragged me down hard. When he did talk to me, it felt amazing. Then one day, I asked him if he could distract me because I felt anxious. Maybe that was too much? He told me to ask later because he was busy. I thanked him and he replied, "Of course." That was the last 2 words I received from him. A few hours later, I asked him if he was still busy. He looked but did not reply. For 3 weeks, I tried to get him to talk to me. Our mutual online friends obviously knew what was going on but did not tell me anything. After 3 weeks with no response, I gave up and fell into a deep hole because I had developed a giant crush on him. It has been over 2.5 years, and I still miss him. When I watch Monk because he lives in San Francisco, when I watch Bob's Burgers because of the first name in the credits, or when I see a specific actor from Brooklyn Nine-Nine because he reminds me of him, I cannot help but recall those memories. I could not watch those 3 shows for a long time because of that. I still miss him when I play GTA Online and am on Cayo Perico because I was once in voice chat with him while scoping the island. I still miss him so much. I miss the feeling I had when I talked to him. I miss seeing the pictures he sent me. I miss the occasional text in German because he used a translation tool. I do not know if he is still alive. I feel so much better now, but I cannot stop thinking about him, no matter how much I try. I have never had such strong feelings for a man before. I have never crushed this hard on someone before. Maybe I will heal fully, but not now. Story 31. Due to an accident, some bones in my body were broken, including in my hands and toes. I didn't tell anyone and lived with it. Whenever someone asks me if I am okay, I respond, "Yeah, I'm fine." Story 32. Besides all the serious issues, I still heal from the embarrassment caused by my terrible small talk at the supermarket. It was 6 p.m., and the cashier was tired. He told me he had another 2 hours to go in his shift and expressed how much he was looking forward to the end of it. Being my sarcastic self, I said, "I can't imagine." He misunderstood, took offense, and asked, "What? You can't imagine doing this job?" I desperately tried to clarify my comment, and I still feel embarrassed. Story 33. My college coordinator's death. My high school was located on a college campus, where students were specifically prepared to enter. At the time, I was undiagnosed but had a combination of autism and epilepsy. High school was difficult and I was suffering. My only escape was animating videos of my characters for YouTube. I met an animation teacher from the film course, and we clicked instantly. I was 14 in 2014, and he took me under his wing, allowing me to participate in his classes and always supporting me. He was euphoric about my work and became my biggest supporter. At that time, he had been dealing with a type of cancer for a while, but nothing severe. In my last year of high school, he announced the opening of the university's first animation course, and he would be the course coordinator. I couldn't have been happier. It felt like fate. My parents wanted me to pursue graphic design because it had better job opportunities. I mentioned this to him, and he offered to meet with my parents, promising not to let them leave until I was allowed to enroll in the course. I completed the entrance exams and passed. These were the years of studying and doing what I loved most with my mentor. Sadly, I became very ill and depressed during the first years, often in and out of the hospital. I struggled to pay attention in classes, but I always greeted him and told him, "I cannot wait for you to hand me my diploma." He was also in and out of the hospital. The cancer never really receded, but he made it seem manageable. In 2020, we were working on our thesis film, and he was excited about helping me find a job at a few studios. Then the pandemic hit. A few months later, a friend called to tell me that one of our teachers mentioned he was probably in his last week, having been in a metastatic state since 2014. If I had something to say to him, I needed to do it quickly. I cannot describe how that moment felt. True denial, pure and raw. I was calm and didn't process any of it. I opened my phone and texted him. Did any of the studios reply about the job applications? He saw the message but never replied. 2 days later, he was gone, just 2 months before our graduation. I never had the chance to say goodbye. In 2021, the graduation ceremony had an empty chair for him. What haunts me the most is our story being cut off without warning, right when it should have been beginning, or how, in that exact moment, my mind blacked out to the point where I played it all out that day as if we still had a future. I see him sometimes in my dreams, but it's a constant state of what could have been. I dropped my animation career and still work with art, but I cannot animate anymore. Story 34. When I approached my wife about some mental health issues I had been experiencing, I was very open and honest about it. This was the first time I shared my struggles with anyone. I dropped all my walls and wanted to talk. She just looked at me, didn't say a word, and continued her day. She no longer knows how bad it has gotten for me. I buried it deep inside. Story 35. Mine was a simple thing. I had told my family that all I wanted for my 50th birthday was a party with my friends and family. I had mentioned it many times over the years. A month or so before the date, I had heard nothing, so I asked them, and they all said, "Oh, we didn't know." I had told them so many times. My sister then tried to arrange a last-minute dinner instead, but I ultimately said no because they had hurt me so deeply that I didn't want to have anything at all. This was after many years of ignoring important aspects of my life, so it hurt far worse than one might think. Story 36. My live-in boyfriend cheated on me. It happened 12 years ago. It was a gut punch. I had no idea. I don't trust anyone to this day. Story 37. My daughter requires multiple invasive and highly dangerous surgeries for both liver disease and a brain tumor. Somehow, she appears to be totally fine. Every time I look at her, I think I must be in some kind of insane fake dream world, and in reality, she is gone while I am just living in a fantasy where she is alive. Story 38. One of my best friends completely abandoned me. I tried contacting her many times and received no response. I do not know what I did to deserve that, but it shows that even the people closest to you can change quickly. Story 39. I was what one would describe as slightly effeminate in my early teens. I was late to puberty, so my voice was similar to a woman's and I experienced late beard growth, which is ironic since I now have a strong beard at 26. It did not help that I was a nerd, spending a lot of time in the library and excelling in math. I was constantly urged to man up and not behave like a little girl. I hated it. I cried in the restrooms, at home, and in the library. When I was found crying, it became worse because men are not supposed to cry. Nobody knows about it. The bullies have grown up. Some of them are married and have children. But a part of me is dead, and it will never come back. From a societal perspective, one could say I am more successful than most of them. I do not want revenge. I just want them to look me in the eye and acknowledge that they were jerks and express their apologies. Story 40. My first girlfriend's suicide. Yes, understandably, that affects you. I know. However, people do not know the major details about our relationship or the depth to which she shaped my worldview and philosophy. She was genuinely a visionary without bias, but she was also deeply troubled. I still experience hallucinations of her semi-regularly, which no one knows. They are aware I used to, but my daily presentation is fine now. I do tell them I struggle, but they do not understand, highlighting how little they grasp the situation. It no longer rules my life, but it definitely affects me. Story 41. The sudden loss of my former partner, who is also the father of our child, to suicide is something I have never fully healed from. Story 42. When I was about 13 or 14, my best friend, my dog, died. I asked my mother if we could have a proper funeral for her. She agreed, but what I didn't know at the time was that after I had some time to think about what I would do without her and ultimately came up with nothing, my mother told my cousin to take my dog's body and put it in the woods in our backyard. A few days later, my siblings and I decided to explore the woods since we hadn't been there for a while. That's when I saw her, half-eaten by birds and flies. It was a horrible sight, and I will never forgive my mother for what she did. I am 17 now, and I still question my purpose here without her. There are so many things I wanted to do with her, and I can't get the image out of my mind. Story 43. Losing a friend and colleague to suicide 11 years ago still upsets me frequently. but I refrain from expressing my feelings in front of others because I do not want to feel like a burden. Story 44. I was assaulted as a child by a stranger and endured years of physical abuse in our toxic home. Though I have grown and evolved through it all, I don't think you can ever truly escape it. Certain noises and scents put me on high alert. Story 45. I have no memories of my father or my early childhood until about the age of 10. I can recall all the abuse that occurred from that age onward. This has caused many unhealed emotional wounds, and I live in a state of constant anxiety. Medication doesn't help much, even the stronger ones. The only thing that alleviates my anxiety is smoking marijuana when it becomes overwhelming. I look at what I assume are normal families, and I desire that so deeply, to be the kind of father my twins need alongside their mother. Story 46. In high school, I was in love with my best friend. I gave him my virginity, and he cried afterward. I thought it was a beautiful moment between us, but it was not. Eventually, he told me he didn't want to be with me, and I was shattered. The person who knew me best, who understood all my secrets and trauma, could not love me. I always suspected he was embarrassed by me because I wasn't pretty or skinny enough. I just wasn't good enough for him, only good enough to be with as long as no one knew. Now that I am older, I understand that sometimes you're just not attracted to someone. 17-year-old me was devastated, and I have always carried this with me. I lost my best friend, lost my first love, and lost any self-esteem I would ever have. It has been 25 years. He is gone now. I still think about him and dream about him, and I have never truly believed anyone who said they loved me. I am pretty sure I am just someone to engage with, not someone to love. I was even married for a long time and always had one foot out the door, waiting for him to wake up one day and tell me it was over. I believe you can only love with total abandon and trust once. Story 47. I experienced a miscarriage during my senior year of high school. The only people who knew were my then boyfriend and his mother. She convinced him I was lying for attention, and a week later, he broke up with me over text and blocked me immediately. It has been 11 years since then. I have only recently considered the idea of having children, but I feel it's too late. I have intentionally chosen not to have kids due to the anger I felt from my loss, possibly as a form of self-punishment. Story 48. In a group of friends, my best friend left her husband, who was also part of the group. I was friends with her first, and she was my closest friend. She was one of two close friends with whom I felt I could talk about anything without being guarded. There was no wall between us. After a few years, she not only left her husband but also the entire friend group to be with someone else. She deceived all of us while doing it, and I unknowingly drove her to the person she was leaving her husband for. She lied every step of the way to all of us. She essentially unfriended me because I chose to remain friends with the group. Eventually, everyone else seemed to have moved on, but I have not, and they are unaware of my feelings. It has been almost 2 years, and I wouldn't even know where to begin or how to bring up old wounds, so I keep it to myself. I still miss her deeply. She was my soul sister. I think about her daily. Story 49. I broke up with my ex-boyfriend after being together for 10 years. I have never gotten over leaving our dog with him, a situation I had no choice in. I cried for years every time I thought about her or saw a boxer dog. A few years later, I bumped into him with our dog, and she was overjoyed to see me again. That moment brought floods of tears and guilt for leaving her. She was the most sensitive and happy soul. Story 50. I told my parents I was going to harm myself and needed to be taken to the hospital. My dad insisted we stop for coffee on the way there. I don't know, it seems silly to write it down, but in that moment, it made me realize that they viewed my struggles as inconveniences to them. Story 51. Watching my mom die has deeply affected me. I'm grateful I was able to hold her hand and be with her during that time, but those images have traumatized me. Story 52. Moving to another country at age 19 with a new language, no family, limited financial resources, and little understanding of the mentality and culture, which is quite different from an English-speaking culture, was challenging. I am 48 and I am still not over it. The pain, rejection, and mental anguish of feeling alone remain significant. People ask me when I moved here after hearing my accent and respond with an "oh cool," then move on. However, the struggle to fit in and my past experiences continue to affect me. I recently had to seek therapy because it was holding me back emotionally. Story 53. I was bullied relentlessly when I was young due to being overweight, being a nerd, having glasses, and my clothes and hair. What was worse was coming home to a mother who bullied me as well. If she caught me crying due to being bullied that day, she would get angry, call me a baby, and tell me to just get over it. If I mouthed back that she wasn't helping or to just leave me alone, she would sometimes even slap me. My dad was a good man but didn't know how to handle this, especially with my mom. He would tell her to leave me alone but loved her too much to divorce her. So the mental and physical abuse continued until I grew strong enough to put a stop to it. One day, I was lying on my bed, feeling depressed, and she came in asking what was wrong. I refused to tell her because I knew where it would lead, but she wouldn't let it go. Finally, I said something like, "Look, Mom, I know what you will say and it never helps. So please just leave me alone and I'll get over it myself." Suddenly and completely unexpectedly, I felt a flurry of slaps and hits on the side of my face and head. I sprang up from my bed, slammed my fist on the dresser out of anger, and accidentally hit a toy or something that shattered. Then I yelled at her with my fists clenched, "You will never hit me again. Do you understand me?" Never. With all my fury and anger, I was fully ready to hit my mom if she came at me. She looked shocked, backed off, and just said, "Don't yell at me," before walking out of the room. She never hit me again or bullied me. The bullying at school didn't stop, though, and I reached my lowest point one night when I almost committed suicide. I went to my dad's nightstand where his gun was, loaded it, put it to my head, but then thought about all the things I would miss out on. Driving, college, losing my virginity, having my own family, so many things. I'm so glad I didn't go through with it, but I've never fully healed from that experience and still have insecurities to this day that sometimes resurface, even as I approach 50. Story 54. Two things affected me. Being told how annoying and loud I was by family and friends due to ADHD and my past abusive relationship. I will never feel as confident, loved, or secure as I should. Story 55. A breakup with an ex who was a close friend for a long time before we dated. When our friendship began to evolve into something more serious, she broke up with her boyfriend and ended that relationship. We dated briefly, but after it ended, she returned to him. They are now married, which makes it impossible for her to have me in her life, even as a friend. I believe that could jeopardize her marriage. I think about her constantly. I miss her, and I know she misses me as well. Pains me that we can't even communicate. Story 56. The constant bullying I experienced in junior high affected me deeply. I faced it from my classmates, my brother, and my father. There was nowhere I could go without being bullied. I still struggle with serious issues because of it. Story 57. Being physically and emotionally neglected by my mother while caring for her affected me deeply. I had to ensure she was okay, get her medication, call my grandmother or the hospital if she wasn't well, cook for both of us, and clean as well. I attended a group for young caregivers for a while, but I didn't understand why we had to do this. I was around 10 years old. Story 58. I felt it was my responsibility to help my parents manage their mental health issues and insecurities during my elementary school years. Story 59. I don't think I've healed from my dad's death. I was 15 when he passed away, and I could never fully process it. He struggled with alcoholism, so we didn't have a very loving relationship. He was a good person but a difficult drunk, and I rarely saw him sober. Many memories are unclear because my mind has blocked them, yet I often dream about him. It's definitely time for therapy. Story 60. I messed up with my ex more than 10 years ago, and I am still not over it. I have been in multiple relationships and generally doing well in life, but from the outside, you might think I have moved on. I miss her every day, and it never hurts any less. I tried therapy, even hypnotherapy, but nothing ever helped. I try to swallow hard, think of something else, and avoid the silence. Thank goodness for podcasts. Story 61. Spending 14 hours saying goodbye to my mother in a country with poor healthcare. where we do not speak the language, and with the man who took her there, holding her as she experienced all the horrible things that come with impending death, looking her in the eyes and telling her I love her, sharing stories from my childhood, and listening to our favorite music, assuring her that I, the least equipped son, would look after my brothers and that she should not worry, holding her hand and falling asleep, only to wake up when she was reaching out to me and finally passing. It was the worst day of my life, especially thinking about all the times I could have begged her to come home, to heal, to be with us again. But I hadn't forgiven her, and now I can only empathize with my mother, who was an incredible woman, fulfilled her responsibilities as a mother, and then found she wasn't happy when we were gone. I would go to therapy and heal, but I cannot afford it. Story 62. When I was about 10, my mother requested child support from my father. The paternity test revealed he was not my biological father. She has no idea who is. I am now 38 years old with children of my own, but I have never recovered from the fact that I am without a father. Story 63. My ex was deceptive and gaslit me for years, taking advantage of my support while getting her health in order, then cheating and leaving shortly after my father passed away. None of my relationships since have lasted due to my trust issues and subconscious need for independence at all costs in case things go wrong again. Story 64. My first boyfriend was a great guy at the start, but over the 6 months, he became verbally abusive. The last straw was when he attempted suicide and told me it was my fault for not loving him enough. It still hurts when I hear anything that reminds me of him, even though it has been a while. Story 65. Going no contact with my parents has been a challenging experience. After the first couple of weeks, I stopped discussing it. Most people do not acknowledge no contact the same way they would the death of a loved one because, first, no one has died, and second, it was my choice. It has been 3 years since I made this decision, and I still cry about it weekly. However, as far as everyone knows, I am happy. Story 66. I was pregnant in 2006. When I was 14 weeks along, I lost the baby. I spent the night alone in the hospital after a dilation and curettage procedure, and no one called or came to see me. I had to find my own ride home. I was never told, "I'm sorry for your loss." Not even by my family members. Over the years, I have shed a tear about it, and sometimes I still think about it. If I ever have a chance, I would gladly take it to have another baby. But at my age of 49, I know it won't happen now. I still reflect on what could have been. Story 67. I had a best friend from before school until we turned 16. We did everything together, and I brought them to every family event I could possibly convince my mom to let me attend. They even went on family vacations with us. We hung out nearly every day, walking around our hometown all night. When they got their driver's license, they became friends with people who thought I was unusual and uncool. They decided to distance themselves from me for those friends. It happened over the summer without any explanation. My parents saw me in pain, shutting down and isolating myself. They told me to try to make amends. My parents sided with those friends, acting like everything was my fault. I spent the summer working and struggling with thoughts of suicide at 16. I attempted it imperfectly before that, but I spent multiple days trying to devise a plan. I'm not sure how I made it through. I felt completely alone. They called me during an event where those friends treated them poorly, and I showed up in support despite the pain. We hung out another time, and they apologized, though it felt insincere, saying they still wanted to be my friend. While the other friends sat in a car across the block mocking my crying and pain, laughing as they drove by. When graduation came, those friends continued to be terrible to my ex-best friend. The ex-friend decided to reach out to me via text when we graduated high school, but where was the effort before that? I received an invitation to the wedding. One of those unpleasant friends was in the wedding party and acted like an attention-seeking nuisance during the vacation they took to celebrate beforehand. At the wedding, they delivered an impromptu speech that was the worst I have ever heard at such an event. Honestly, after not knowing this person for years before the wedding, I still could have given a better impromptu speech. Unsurprisingly, that friend left early. The more I reflect on my childhood memories and this friendship, the more I realize how poor of a friend they had been even before all this occurred. Since then, I have made a few friends through college, work, and my current partner, but I cannot find the same type of trust and closeness with anyone else. I have been in therapy for depression for several years and have been working toward healing, not only from this situation, but that's another story. It's astonishing how I still have nightmares and dreams involving this person who hurt me so deeply. There is not enough awareness of how painfully impactful friendship breakups can be. I am unsure if I will ever fully heal. I can forgive as we were young, but I will never want to be this person's friend again. We live two different lives, and unfortunately, this pain will linger with me for the rest of mine. Story 68. My son spent a week in the neonatal intensive care unit when he was born. He is a completely healthy first grader now, and I am an anxious wreck. Leaving my baby in the hospital when I was sent home was emotionally devastating. I am in therapy, I am on medication, and I am doing all the necessary work, but that trauma will always affect me. Story 69. A few things to be honest. Where do I begin? When I was in school, I nearly choked on my food. At that moment, I realized I was alone because my friends were laughing at me. Even as I was turning purple and nearly blacking out, I was constantly picked on for being the big guy. To be honest, I still get picked on for it. It's reached the point where I don't eat anything at all on some days. My girlfriend cheated on me with my best friend. He was a very close friend. I even talked him out of suicide, and then he went and took my girlfriend. But anyway, you just have to keep smiling and move on from these things. Story 70. One of the first cats my husband and I got together was called Tommy. He was a big brute of a cat, genuinely massive. He looked like a house panther but had the soppiest little mew and was the biggest coward. Whenever we went to the veterinarian, he would climb into my arms to be held while getting any injections, burying his face into me. One day, while I was cooking dinner, he was begging me for scraps. He stood on his hind legs, sinking his claws into my hip to keep reminding me he was there and wanted food. I told him to go away, so he hopped down and wandered off. About 10 minutes later, my husband went upstairs to hang some laundry and yelled that something was wrong with Tommy. By the time I got upstairs, our double bed was on its side, and Tommy was right under the middle. He was wailing in pain and his back legs weren't working at all. We were at the emergency veterinarian within minutes after calling them on the way. He screamed the entire time, but it sounded wet. The veterinarian examined him, took him back, and gave him some high-dose painkillers. Tommy had always had a heart murmur, and unfortunately, his heart had thrown two clots. One lodged in his spine and paralyzed him, and the other was in his lungs. They asked if we wanted to see him, and we did. Poor Tommy was so angry he didn't recognize us initially and was growling and hissing, but when we spoke to him, he started purring. We had him put to sleep 10 minutes later. We talked to him and stroked him the entire time. After he died, the fluid in his lungs started coming out of his nose and mouth. Couldn't believe how much there was. As soon as he passed, my husband left the room and was sobbing in the waiting area, but I couldn't leave him and couldn't stop stroking him. The veterinarian eventually had to ask me to step outside. Every time it was quiet for weeks after that, I could hear Tommy wailing. I don't think I'll ever forget the noise he made. Story 71. My father abandoned me when I was about 6 years old and disappeared from my life. He reappeared a few years later, showering his new wife's children with love while neglecting my brother and me. He was always seeking validation from women in his life. Story 72. The way my mom treated me growing up and the way she still treats me at 33 years old reflects a lack of concern. She is completely okay with not being in my life since I'm gay and have a husband. However, she has her family with her cousin that she has planned to have her whole life, so we're both happy in our own ways. People know I'm hurt but don't realize how deep it goes. I truly feel like a shell of myself most of the time. I wish I could afford therapy. Story 73. I suffer from an invisible rare chronic pain condition that nobody understands, and it's nearly unbelievable. I have had to pretend to be okay or find ways to explain this truly strange condition. My situation is much better now, and I do not feel pain all the time, but I easily relapse if I'm not careful, and I do not consider myself cured even at my best. People do not take me seriously anymore because of this, and the way my condition has completely halted my plans. I have largely given up on dreaming, and what hurts the most is being around people from my past who are unaware of my struggles. It always brings me back to square one in terms of acceptance and how I view my future. Story 74. Going through a long period of underemployment was challenging. I try to view it as an opportunity to understand what it's like to live on a budget, but it was a difficult time that has left me with a skewed perspective on finances. Looking back, I realize I made mistakes during that time. I should have applied to more jobs and avoided what we now refer to as ghost jobs. Instead of wasting time on job boards, I should have gone directly to company websites, and I should have been more organized in my approach. Much of it was also due to bad luck. I hesitate to discuss this experience because I don't have much helpful advice for others who go through similar situations. I am fortunate to have a good job now, but that period has likely affected my finances in ways that could have long-term impacts. I find it difficult to relate to people who have not experienced something similar. I cannot talk about this with my family, as they do not understand. They are of different ages and have not faced the same circumstances, so they view my experience solely as a personal failure. Story 75. My first love really loved that girl. A random girl came up to me who looked exactly like her. There's always something that reminds me of her. Story 76. The trauma from my first relationship has improved over time. However, I still experience lingering anxiety and guilt about intimacy. Story 77. My breakup. People know it happened, obviously, but I don't know if they understand just how intense the aftermath has been. Story 78. Honestly, the summer when I was 16 years old was terrible for many reasons. I had a disappointing job, my friends abandoned me, and my parents were distant and unkind. My mother even said she blamed herself for how my brother and I turned out. I had acted out and caused a lot of trouble that year, so I felt like I deserved it and was just serving my time. I didn't think I could get help because my battle with depression was overwhelming. I didn't like who I was becoming, and everything seemed to go wrong. I was working so hard to get back into my parents' good graces. One friend, in particular, treated me poorly, and I wish I could go back in time to stand up for myself and tell her what I should have said. I am still affected by it. Sometimes I wish I had just said, "Forget this," and run away. As an adult, I know that would have been a terrible idea, but that's how bad it was. Story 79. I have a visible disability that my family never really acknowledged, and it felt taboo to talk about it. I find myself trying to hide it and feel a lot of shame about it. It has held me back from enjoying life to its fullest potential, and I hold a lot of resentment that my parents never discussed it with me. Despite my disability, I have never had problems dating, participating in sports, or being gainfully employed. I have gone to therapy for it and have come a long way. I think most people who know me would be surprised to hear about my insecurity. However, sometimes I wonder how much more I would have enjoyed my life if I had felt more comfortable in my own skin. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.